Well, I know it's just the preseason, but there's a lot to take from these games. The young players are treating it like it's real. You know they're giving 100% and then some. And the Warriors remain undefeated. There's a lot to break down from this Warriors-Kings game tonight. It was a fun ride. Greg Silver joins me next. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. In fact, YouTube is where you can only find our exclusive live shows. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, a fantastic resource with the NBA season just around the corner. For any event, Gametime is where you want to go to get tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, download the Gametime app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. You can follow Greg Silver on Twitter at Greg O Silver. The O is OH, and over on Threads, where my friend, I do not see you. How did you do that? What the hell just happened there?
Wow, how did I do that? That was incredible.
Did you do that?
I threw up the O. Whoa.
What
this is why you
the
got to tune into
hell?
YouTube, guys.
I don't know what's going on here. If you're listening to the podcast, Greg is literally making hand symbols and like literally emojis are floating out of the screen. I have no idea what's going on right now. Regardless, follow Greg Silver on Threads at Greg O Silver. The O doesn't have an H in it. It's just Greg, the letter O, and Silver. You can follow me, Cyrus, Saatsaz, on Threads at Dog Wild. Greg, great to see you. Dude, what did you do? You just did a heart and then just blew it up? Yeah, mine.
Well, I was actually doing the O for the Greg O, and then
right. But then when you do
blew
that,
up into a bunch of hearts.
Hearts emerged. What the hell was going on there? Greg, great to see you, man. It is it's today's Sunday. I'm losing track of everything in life. It is Sunday night. The Warriors are now 3-0 in the preseason. Your immediate reaction to a fun game. The Sac crowd was into it. Yeah, what's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm good. I'm stoked about the preseason, to be honest, just off of the fact that there's been close games, especially these last two. And it's kind of a good chance for the team to play in pressure basketball without having any real stakes. I don't think you can ever really simulate the game environment, and that includes the preseason. So it's not like a true test of what it's going to be, but for where we're at in the present, this is really all you can ask for. It was a lot of fun. The Kings, it also reminded me how fun the Kings are now that they've gotten a lot better. And, you know, there was a stretch there in the fourth quarter where nobody's making a shot, and then it immediately flip-flopped to trading buckets with everybody. So really cool to see. I wish the Warriors ended up finishing that off in overtime, just because I think that would have been a really exciting moment for these young guys. But to just grind it out in overtime and then see Jonathan Kuminga have consistency in the preseason, in addition to like the flashes he does, then that's all around awesome. So I can't ask for much more. You see, like, they're actually trying to win and they care. I mean,
Yep.
You know, both coaches, there was like challenges. We had intentional fouls. We got the timeouts to set up plays. So
Yep.
all of that's just fun, man. Like I'm happy.
I am happy too. I was to me, I feel like there is a legitimate rivalry between the Warriors and Kings now. There's animosity. The fan bases have vitriol between them. I was more happy. What made me more happy than the Warriors winning was seeing the Kings fans lose. Like, that was my favorite part of the night, was that entire arena being disappointed. That brought joy to me. Whether that makes me sadistic, who knows? Maybe I'm twisted, but regardless.
Oh, I don't know about that for me. I mean, part of it is I grew up close to Sacramento, so love them anyway. But they've suffered enough. Like, they've suffered enough. It's a preseason game. I don't need to see them sad. I'll take the win. But
yeah, they annoy me. Yeah, that fan base annoys me. I love seeing them lose to the Warriors every single time. But that, in my opinion, that is a real rivalry right now. But let's get into this. First things first. I got a lot of notes from tonight's game. Lost a lot of notes. That's part of why we had a few minute delay there. I literally sit there and observe the game as carefully as can be. I collect a lot of information, and then it just went poof on me tonight. So I do apologize if I'm not as normally chock full of information as usual, but I do have some stuff here. First things first, Jonathan Kuminga is a much better player than he was the first 2 years. He's getting a run. Tonight he had 34 minutes, I believe. Once again, led the team in scoring, if I'm not mistaken. 28 points in 34 minutes of play. 7 of 18 from the field. Was just 1 of 4 from beyond the arc. A weaker night for him in terms of three-point shooting, but he went to the line a buttload of times, had 17 free throw attempts, making 13 of them. That is very encouraging to see, considering this team struggled a lot last year in terms of visits to the free throw line and free throw attempts. I believe they were worst in the NBA in that department. And he went 13 for 17, so he made most of them. He grabbed 6 rebounds. Some of those rebounds were big. I mean, he was fighting for those things. We'll get more into details about that. Led the team in plus minus, finished a plus 11. But I think what I'm taking from Kaminga more than anything else is that this is a player that belongs now. Whatever we saw last year, him not even getting minutes in the Lakers series, I'm not going to go back there. It's time to move forward. What I'm seeing right now is a player that has to play if this Warriors team wants to achieve success. He's athletic as you know what. The skill set is developing right before our eyes. If you love the Warriors, you have to love what you're seeing with Jonathan Kuminga. What are your thoughts with Kaminga through these first 3 games? Again, tonight, 28 points, 6 rebounds, and 13 of 17 from the free throw line.
Well, look, it is time to move forward, and I think the Warriors know that. I think that's been their mindset for the entire offseason, that maybe they had the 2-track plan in mind when they won that 4th championship and everything was going to be glorious again. And then reality set in a little bit and that didn't happen. And that's okay. Like, we are moving forward. And I think they understand that with Kaminga, that this is the boom or bust year for a guy that they invested a lot in. Like, that didn't really work out with James Wiseman. They ended up trading him. They didn't want to play him. They didn't trust him to play defense. He was injured. However you want to spin it, he's not going to be a part of the Dubs' future. But Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody absolutely still could be. And Kuminga's got so much potential. So what we're seeing in the preseason, it's not just the stats. Like, when you say, oh, he didn't shoot great from 3 tonight, I don't care about that. I care that he was aggressive. Getting to the line 17 times is big. I like that he tried to drive in at the end of regulation. I know the ball got knocked out of bounds and it ends up going to overtime, but just it's a mentality thing. Like, it really is for this Warriors team, because they understand that time is precious. And when you don't have Chris Paul and Steph Curry out there and you actually have a close game against another division rival, maybe it's the preseason, but they said it on the broadcast. There's 450 players in the world fighting for these spots.
Yep.
Everybody wants to be a pro basketball player. Everybody wants to be at the top of the top. And so they don't take these things for granted. And I'm loving just the passion I'm seeing out of the second unit in particular.
Absolutely, man. I'm 100% with you. There is a lot to get to tonight. So I'll just go through all my notes. These are not necessarily in order of importance because, again, I'm going off my backup notes. Which again, I'm so annoyed that I just literally, who knows what happened to my data. It's gone. All right. So here's what I observed. And Greg, I'd love your feedback on each and all of this. For starters, the Warriors won this game. They're up 3-0. But they played this game tonight without Steph and Curry. They played this game tonight without Chris Paul. Obviously, Draymond Green's been out. Whereas the Kings were playing everybody. They had a full roster, I think, save for JaVale McGee. But I mean, look, McGee's not, I wouldn't call him an important part of that Kings team. A very good Kings team, by the way. We're going to talk about them in a little bit because I'll put it like this, folks. If in April or May, whatever it is, maybe even June, when the Western Conference Finals roll around, if by some chance it's the Warriors and Kings, don't be surprised. There is a very strong possibility what we saw tonight, granted it's preseason, are the 2 best teams in the Western Conference. Very possible. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. But nonetheless, the Warriors won this game without 3 of their best players. Did that matter to you at all, Greg? Was that important? Was that significant? Your thoughts there?
Yeah, it did. And again, I look at it internally, not so much as who the Kings were playing necessarily, but just the fact that the young guys were forced to get some 4th quarter run in a back and forth game and kind of play a fast paced, high intensity, high pressure situation and try to go and finish it off in overtime. The chat is just making me chuckle so hard.
It's
right
ridiculous.
Now.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, they're on fire tonight. Sorry. Go ahead.
I know. I really need to get off the tab when I'm speaking. But going back to what I was saying. No, it does matter that they didn't have their guys because last year the theme was Steph Curry's going to play a lot of minutes. He missed more time with injury than we were used to since really like his early years in the league when he couldn't stay healthy with the ankle. Last year had to miss a couple periods of time, and he got played so many minutes because the Warriors were always floating on the play-in bubble for the entire year because they couldn't play defense on the road. They were always fouling. They couldn't finish games on the road, even against bad teams.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course it matters because you need the maximum amount of people to just step up. Your Gary Paytons, hopefully he can be healthy. Can we get a prolonged period of Andrew Wiggins and people besides your Stephen Curry, your Klay Thompson? And I hate to say it, but Draymond Green is aging and you can't be fully dependent on him to defend how he does every single night. That's just not a championship recipe. So very, very happy to see the young guys get it done and not have that support system, even if a loss was inconsequential.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Technically inconsequential, but again, with these wins, you're developing confidence with these young players. You're developing cohesiveness. It does matter to a certain extent, and I think this year matters a lot more than some other years. Again, I've said this before. 3 of the 4 Warriors title teams were either undefeated in the preseason or I think went 4-1. The one exception to that was the 2018 team, but that was when Kevin Durant was in year 2. The team was very set in terms of their roster. It wasn't like they had a lot of young players they're developing, and they were just going through the motions at that point. So the preseason does bear relevancy. And it was impressive. All the more impressive, I thought, that the Warriors pulled this off, again, without their arguably 3 best players. Roz Goldawode, I always butcher her last name. Please forgive me for that. And also my apologies real fast while I remember this, to Dario Saric, who is of Croatian descent, is ethnicity, whatever you want to call that. I said he was Serbian last show. My sincerest apologies for that. Dario Saric represents the Croatia and not Serbia. I my sincerest apologies. Roz Goldawode, if again, correct me if I'm wrong. Greg, can you attempt that better than me?
I believe Roz Golden Wude is how I usually hear it on broadcasts.
Golden Wude. Okay. She said something very interesting in the first quarter. She had they went to her for a sideline report, and she reported. I haven't seen or heard this reported anywhere else, and she made it sound like it was an exclusive, a breaking story. And Mark Jones and Richard Jefferson seem to acknowledge this as well. That Steve Kerr held a meeting with the team's Big Six, meaning their starting 5 and then Chris Paul, and the message was very clear. Yet it kind of sucks that they actually had to have this meeting. But the message was that if we're going to worry about who's starting, if we're going to worry about who's finishing games, this isn't going to be a title team. Like, those kinds of concerns need to be out the window, and they need to be out the window now. Kerr basically did not want this to be an issue that came up during the regular season. He didn't want this to be something that reporters were bringing up on a consistent basis, causing a distraction. The message seemed to be loud and clear. Look, be happy and be comfortable with whatever role you have. And Chris Paul is the one that sticks out the most in all this because he's the new guy. He has not embraced a role that involves him coming off the bench so far, at least not in terms of his attributions, in terms of what he said outside of his most recent interview, where he kind of set a different tone. But for the most part, he hasn't really come around to coming off the bench. He's never come off the bench his entire career. But apparently Steve Kerr had this meeting with his Big Six, which includes the typical starting 5 and Chris Paul. And according to Roz, they're on the same page now, that this is now a situation that reportedly the 6 are going to embrace and accept whatever role they get. Did you hear that as well? And any thoughts you want to add to that?
I think it's important that they had the conversation now, because if it was something that even maybe needed to be said, then you have to have the conversation right away and just get rid of that, because I'll say it again, when your team starts slow, it sets a tone for the entire rest of the season that makes everything a little bit harder. It's an uphill climb. It is exhausting. And then you kind of burn out in the end. So if the Warriors can just get off to a good start in terms of what they can control, injuries, you cannot control.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of other circumstances like Andrew Wiggins and family circumstances, you cannot control that. Your attitude, your effort, your willingness to be a team player, buy in, be on the same page, that absolutely can be controlled. And so I think, like, I'm not worried about it, to be honest. I'm glad that they all came away on the same page and everything. Actually, I have to say, I know Draymond is probably, like, personality-wise, the strongest personality and the most likely to maybe throw a fit about it of the returners. And I would completely disagree with that. Like, he is a really emotional player, but
Mhm.
he's going to take whatever role comes to him, and he doesn't really care about stats anymore. Even in the playoffs, like, he was suspended a game and then immediately goes to Steve Kerr and is like, I want to come off the bench because we're not benching Looney. So I really think it's probably a Chris Paul thing more than anybody, but singling him out isn't going to do it any good. And I'm not too stressed about it. I'm not.
Well, I'm definitely not stressed about it now after that report, because I was wondering, like, if this discussion was going to be had, and I'm really relieved that Steve Kerr kind of just put it out there and put it in the open, so that they can move on. And again, I cannot wait to see Chris Paul with the second unit. This second unit is going to be damn good. I mean, they're already damn good. I'm coming away from this preseason very encouraged about the depth of this Warriors team. Early on in the game, I thought the Warriors were a little too flimsy defensively. They gave up a lot of wide open threes, and that resulted in Sacramento shooting, at least in the first quarter, 66.7% from beyond the arc. They were 8 of 12 from deep. You saw the Kings take a 35-28 lead after one quarter of play. But then in the second quarter, you saw the Warriors defense tighten things up, and Sacramento was 0 for 9. And that's where the game really started to turn around between these two teams. The Warriors tightened up their defense, so I was very encouraged to see that. Andrew Wiggins has had a relatively slow preseason so far, entering tonight, and you saw a heavier minute load for him. He played 22 minutes, although I don't know if that's heavier than we've seen him play, but he was playing in both halves. We saw him play significant minutes again. 22 minutes for a starter in the preseason is a good chunk. Statistically, I thought he was great. 6 for 11 from the field, was 3 for 5 from beyond the arc, was 5 for 7 from the free throw line. Grabbed 2 rebounds, had 2 assists, only had 1 turnover, finished the game with 20 points. Those stats are a little surprising. Like if you just watched him play tonight, I don't know if you would guess that he put up those kind of numbers, but he did. He looked a lot better than the first 2 games. I echo those same sentiments for Klay Thompson. What are your thoughts about Andrew? Oh, shoot. I didn't realize how late we were. When we come back, sorry, I completely lost track of time. When we come back, give me your thoughts on Andrew Wiggins. We'll also talk about Klay Thompson. Did not realize how late into the show we were today. That is my bad entirely. Got to give some love real fast. I don't do this normally. I am off my game tonight. Let's start off with game time. And again, right now, this is the time of year where the NBA season is just around the corner. We got football every weekend. We got concerts. There's events all over the place, and you need tickets for those events. And that's where Game Time comes into play. This is a sponsor that I especially love because it's easy for me to sell it. They've got a low price guarantee, folks, meaning if you buy your tickets from Game Time and then you see another set of tickets in the same row in the same section for a cheaper price, they will match it. That is huge. That's a low price guarantee. Their app is phenomenal in terms of the visuals and the multimedia elements, being able to see exactly what your view is going to look like from the tickets you're considering buying. And you shouldn't have to worry about buying tickets to your next big event. And that's another reason why Game Time is huge. They've got supply. They rarely, if ever, sell out. They got killer last minute deals. They got all-in prices. And again, the best price guarantee means they are the way to go when it comes to buying tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For the everydayers, this week's schedule is set. We're recording this live on Sunday night, so this will constitute our Monday show. Kylan Mills will join the program Tuesday and Wednesday. Greg, you might appreciate our lineup for Thursday. I got 2 Hall of Famers joining this program on Thursday. I got Rick Barry and former Golden State Warriors head coach, Hall of Fame head coach, George Karl. What I'm particularly going to be interested in, because I wanted to talk about this with George for a long time, back in 1987, the Golden State Warriors played the Utah Jazz in the playoffs, and I believe they upset them. The Warriors were notorious for pulling off these big upsets in the 80s and early 90s. They upset the Sonics, they upset the Spurs, the Admirals, San Antonio Spurs. They upset the Jazz with Karl Malone and John Stockton. This was one of those postseasons. But what nobody knows about is that I believe it after it was, I can't remember the game, but we're going to play the clip of it on the show, and I'm going to hear George Karl's response because there was a legendary brawl after one of those games in Utah. It started off with the players fighting each other. George Karl ends up punching a fan because the fans were getting involved. It was very reminiscent of the melee at the Palace in Detroit back when the Pacers and the Pistons got into it many years ago. That was much more notorious than this. But folks, look it up on YouTube. You will thank me later. We're also going to play it on the show Thursday. So again, George Karl and Rick Barry are going to join me on Thursday, and then we're going to have a Friday night live edition to finish up the preseason. So that's the lineup for this week. You can follow Greg Silver on Twitter at Greg O Silver. The O has an H in it on Twitter, and on Threads, it's Greg O Silver without the H. Your thoughts on Andrew Wiggins, Greg, and his performance tonight?
Yeah, I mean, in the preseason, I'm always going to be more concerned with the unproven players than the ones who have proven themselves on the biggest stage. But I think my biggest thing with Wiggins is just wanting to see him out there more, because when he's very much a rhythm player to me. I mean, I know like Steph and Klay are the obvious rhythm players because they are high volume shooters and they're constantly moving around without the basketball. But Wiggins is another rhythm player to me just because he can quietly put up 20 points. Like, oh, he did it tonight. And I think for that reason, just when you look at the well-roundedness of his game between offense and defense and being able to step up and defend the other team's best wing or perimeter player, like I think that's probably the biggest loss to Klay Thompson's game since having those two injuries. That's no knock on Klay. It's a combination of age and having two of the worst injuries to have to go through. But it's always good to just see Wiggins out there. Like I think I've come a long way with him and my relationship with him. I thought he had no ability to elevate, no it factor, no spice to his game. And I got proved so wrong. Thank goodness there in 2022. So now I'm very comfortable with him. He's kind of a security blanket. And over this Kerr run for the Warriors in particular, there's been a lot of security blankets, which are usually the unsung heroes like your Andres and your Livingstons and, guys that are more than just your little role players that can also provide some big minutes too. So That's how I'm feeling on Wiggs.
Absolutely. He had a good night tonight. Another player that was struggling a bit in the first two games was Klay Thompson. And Klay played 17 minutes in this game, again, for a night where Stephen Curry and Chris Paul had the night off. Draymond Green still recovering from that sprained ankle. I think he's going to be good to go for opening tip. Don't quote me on that. That is just my guess. But Klay Thompson in tonight's game had 12 points, 4 of 9 shooting, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc. Your thoughts? He was a +7 in the plus minus. Wiggins, by the way, was an even 0, neither plus or minus in that department. What were your thoughts on Klay's performance tonight?
Just wanting him to seem comfortable out there is important for sure, because last year he didn't do a ton of training over the offseason from those 2 injuries. So he wasn't playing back-to-backs for a while. And I think in the playoffs, he did get a little bit gassed out. He was short on a lot of his shots in that Lakers series in particular. He was really good games 1 and 2. And then I think for the next 4, really, really struggled from the field. So I see Sean Stanley in the chat talking about Klay getting his rhythm. That's exactly it. Like, he is a big rhythm guy, and maybe even more so than Steph because of how much he does the catch and shoot and not as much creating his own shot. And so I think with Klay, I agree that he will be totally fine. I'm not worried about it. And I know that the contract extension is another big point of discussion, which we can get into some other time possibly.
Well, we can do now. We'll do now. We're going to give some love to one of our sponsors, and then let's get into that, because Adrian Wojnarowski during tonight's was it pregame or halftime? I don't know when that was, but we had Bob Myers as part of the panel for NBA Countdown, and then Woj dropped the bomb like he always does about Klay Thompson. We will discuss that topic next, because that is a big story. I don't think we can put that off. First, need to give some love to another sponsor of ours, and that's BetterHelp. And this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at betterhelp.com/lockedonnba and get on your way to being your best self. And look, I recently went through a period in life where my mental health was not the greatest. Unfortunately, most of all of us will have to deal with our parents getting ill. Maybe someday we lose them. And that's just one of many things that could add anxiety, that could add depression, that could just really just twist your mind into knots on top of all the rigors of life. I mean, folks, this is not an easy thing. This world we call reality, and sometimes we struggle, and that's normal. That's okay, and that's where BetterHelp is there for you. BetterHelp is all about providing you therapists through an online method, so it's a lot easier to find your therapy. You don't have to take time out of your schedule to drive to an office. You don't have to waste gas. It's easy. You're right at home. You can just literally continue just wearing your PJs if you want. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Again, it's entirely online, so it's convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, which is another very important facet, because you might not connect with your first therapist. You might not connect with your first 5 therapists. They will work with you to find the right person. So make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on-NBA.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cat is on fire tonight. You can follow Greg Silver on all social media platforms, not all, on Twitter at Greg O Silver. The OH, it's Greg O with an H. On Threads, it's Greg O Silver without the H. Greg O Silver. And you can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads at Dog Wild. I'm trying to get this ad banner off our screen. All right. So Adrian Wojnarowski was on NBA Countdown today and revealed that there is no progress with the contract extension talks between Klay Thompson and the Golden State Warriors. He had reported back in April approximately that Klay was looking for a deal close to the max, which would pay him close to $70 million as a 38-year-old player. The Warriors will not give him that much. The Warriors have made offers to him. That much I can tell you, but they have not been offers that he is satisfied with. Klay Thompson did also conduct an interview recently with Anthony Slater of The Athletic, where he said that he doesn't want a max deal. That's not what he's looking for. He's just looking for a deal that will not hurt the Warriors, but that will translate to fair compensation. But then we get this report from Wash today that talks are going nowhere. And Bob Myers, Greg, why don't you elaborate on what Bob Myers said? Because I feel like you articulated that a lot more clearly than I did during our pregame meeting.
Yeah, I know I sent that over to you, and the Woj report, it's interesting and everything, but Bob Myers in particular is the one that was worth paying attention to because he's one of the few people that has that kind of insight into the organization and has all these personal relationships with these players, and now is on a more outside role and knows how hard it is, and was pretty candid about how hard these negotiations are. He said it was a very delicate thing because so often you hear in sports like, oh, it's just business. And he said, it's not just business with Klay Thompson and this team. Like he and everyone will stress it over and over how rare it is to have 3 stars stick together for over a decade. That is ridiculous. And, Draymond just got his deal. Steph Curry's probably never going to play for another team. I could say that with about 98% confidence. So Klay's kind of like that other guy and the third guy, and he's had a little bit of a different career path than these other two. He does things differently than Draymond. He missed 2 whole years, and so I don't think they want to depart, but at the same time, there's the luxury tax that adds up that the Warriors are always at the highest of. There's the CBA agreement. Wiggins has a lot of money being paid. I know they got rid of Poole's contract, and that helps, so they might not have to pay Chris Paul beyond this year. But it seems like something the front office doesn't want to have to deal with this year. And it sounds like it's a very real possibility that Klay Thompson could go into next summer and test the waters of free agency. That doesn't mean that he's going to leave, as we saw with Draymond. I think that the Warriors want to keep Klay. I think that Klay does want to stay, but that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. And I think it really is objectively a tricky thing. Are you muted, Ty?
Apparently I am. Thank you, because
Okay.
that's thank you for saving me there. If you weren't there, anyways, I could have been talking for 3 minutes with my mic muted. No, the Klay Thompson thing, I don't mind him going into playing this season in a contract year. Oftentimes that motivates individuals. Maybe we'll get a more productive season out of Klay, given he's angling for a bigger deal. Klay doesn't seem like someone who would suffer, whose play would worsen as a result of him being in a contract season, because some players do actually wilt under that pressure. I hope Klay is not one of those individuals. So that part of it doesn't concern me. For folks who are unfamiliar with the CBA and how that works, the Warriors will keep his bird rights, regardless of whether or not they give him a extension during the season, or if they wait until he becomes an unrestricted free agent. They can still pay him whatever he wants, even though regardless of the cap, meaning the cap restriction would not apply to Klay the same way it would another free agent who the team would not own the bird rights to. I think one of the many questions is, how much should they pay him, right? I mean, I believe in the Anthony Slater interview, there was a reference to Klay seeking a contract similar to Andrew Wiggins, which would be somewhere in the $27 million a year range. In my humble opinion, and Greg, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, and I'll read any answers in the chat as well to this question. What do you think he deserves? Like, what do you think the Warriors should pay him?
Just to be completely honest, I'm pretty bad with contract estimations because the number goes up and up and up every single year. Like, anytime in football someone's paid, it's like they're the highest paid ever at that position. And it's like, great, just wait till the next guy gets paid. But if we're going to go with the it's all relative theme, which actually, thank you for teeing me up there, I do think something comparable to Wiggins is fair. I know that he is a little bit older, and that you said he'd be about 38 by the time he was at the end of such a deal that was reported he'd want. And so, yeah, that's pretty old. But I do think that Klay is actually the type of player, if we're going to talk about play style, that could age better than a Draymond Green. And yes, the injuries are a factor, but I think that his game actually is suited to be able to age. He's not a particularly explosive athlete like a Derrick Rose, Ja Morant, Russell Westbrook type, where if they lose a step, it completely drops off. So I think it's okay to put him in that Wiggins ballpark. Now, I'd be more concerned over how it fits in with the rest of the team, and hopefully those big three can just sit down and be like, okay, let's work this out. Like, we've been in this together for so long, and let's make sure we can all take numbers that work. But just on the individual standpoint, I think something comparable to Wiggins is totally fair, especially if he plays how he was playing at certain stretches last year.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we see in the chat, and Josh, love you right back. Dr. Sean, good to see you. You're suggesting around 25 to 28 a year over 3 to 4 years. So basically something similar to Draymond is what you're suggesting. Douglas Mike suggests 3 years, 72 million. So curious to see what happens. Bob Myers added the complexity of Klay, given the personal aspect of it. He mentioned the fact that Klay is going to get a statue someday outside of Chase Center, how the Bay Area and the organization, he is beloved by everyone involved. And all these things do add complications. It's because under most circumstances, you're paying someone based on what they can contribute largely on the basketball court. But there are a lot of personal feelings here. So it is fascinating, to say the least. Going back to tonight's game real quick, Brandin Podziemski, to me, has been one of the incredible positives for this Golden State Warriors organization. It was hard to judge him initially, especially given how he performed in Summer League. But, fortunately on this show, we brought up the fact that Stephen Curry also struggled in his first Summer League, and Stephen Curry, as Podziemski's mentor, gave him some tips on, how to overcome whatever disappointment came with that shooting performance in Summer League. And Podziemski looks like he belongs. He didn't have a great night tonight statistically, only had 4 points. He only shot 1 for 5 from the field. I saw a few people in the chat comment that he hesitated a little too much. He had a few open looks from beyond the arc. I agree with that. I feel like as his game evolves and as he becomes more comfortable and gains experience, you likely will not see him do that. And you'll see that quick trigger where the moment he has an open shot, he'll just take it. I like his release. He's got a really fast release. He did grab 6 rebounds, had 4 assists. He's a tough body. Like, he's a big dude for someone who's 6'4". Your thoughts on Podziemski, and not just tonight, but just in general? I mean, This, in my opinion, has been a pleasant surprise for the Warriors. Your thoughts?
I'm really stoked on Brandin Podziemski, and I'm also hearing that Steve Kerr really likes him too, which says a lot because if it's a guy that he can trust out there and plug in the system, and what everybody's been saying on the broadcast and all the analysts is that Podziemski is this really high IQ guy, and I think that counts for a lot if the organization feels that way internally. So yeah, the shooting, I don't think that should be the biggest point of concern at this time. Like if he's gonna get consistent minutes with the Warriors, he will have to be someone that's willing to take shots and hit them consistently. But as far as a rookie year goes, you got to look at more of the big picture and not just a little bit of an individual detail. And that's about, like you said, looking like he belongs, being able to facilitate. And actually, I think this is kind of a nice way to wrap up my thoughts on the team as a whole and tie it in with Podziemski is everything you're seeing about this team in the preseason, and Angelina Martin for NBC Sports Bay Area has written some great articles recently. They're all saying more or less the same thing, which is we want everybody to be on the same page. We want a team that's high IQ. We want big boys who can run the offense. And if Podziemski can fit into that theme and be someone who's unselfish and buy in, I think he's going to be just fine. The skills, the scoring, the speeding up the game with his feet and slowing it down in his head, that can all come as he gets reps and he's able to get minutes on the floor and learn from these guys. But it's about the fitting into the larger theme of unselfishness and maturity.
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled by what could become of this kid. Jerome Robinson tonight did not impress. I really don't. I'm not that excited about this guy. I hope we don't see much of him in the future. I thought Moses Moody continued a solid preseason. He went 5 for 10 from beyond the field tonight. Was 3 from 6 from the 3-point line, including drawing a foul out there for 3 free throws, although he did miss one of them. Finished with 16 points. Was a plus 10 in the plus minus. The only player with a higher plus minus was Kaminga with plus 11. So Moody was on par. One player that actually there were 2 players besides everyone we've talked about so far that, in my opinion, really stuck out. One of those players was Lester Quinones. Lester, in my opinion, this was his coming out party tonight. I haven't seen a game yet from him where I came out impressed and where he actually stuck out, where I actually was, going back into the reel of my memory and thinking of some plays he was conducting. He's fantastic. And what the role I saw him play tonight, which seemed to be the best fit, was being a point guard. Like there was a lineup out there where he played point alongside, I think, like 3 wings and a center. I think Trayce Jackson-Davis was a center, and that lineup was working. They were beating up on the Kings pretty nicely there. I like this kid. Lester Quinones has a 2-way deal this year. Again, the point guard position seems to be the right fit for him, but he's also big enough where you can slide him over to the 2 defensively, so you could have Podziemski and Quinones out there together, hypothetically. Your thoughts on Lester Quinones tonight, who I thought played marvelously?
Well, he's not hesitant to shoot, and I know that was just what we were discussing. He's not hesitant, and I love the way he was just firing it away in overtime. And there's a difference between having a quick trigger and being reckless. I think he's a good balance of that. I didn't see any recklessness out there, but he's also not afraid of the moment and being willing to just drive into the paint and float one up or be out on the perimeter. And it's like, oh, you're giving me a little bit of space? Sure. I think it's fun. I was more impressed with Lester than Jerome Robinson for sure.
Yeah, Jerome Robinson. I mean, Jerome Robinson, for some reason, Jerome Robinson came into the game before Moody tonight. I don't know. I really hope Kerr is not developing this another, love affair type thing like with Jerome last year, with Ty Jerome last year that we're seeing
negative
Jerome.
Thoughts out of your head. It's all
I know
because
Jerome Robinson was 2 for 11 from the field, 0 for 5 from beyond the arc, and -7 in the plus minus. Lester Quinones, meanwhile, and I saw someone in the chat say they'd like to see less turnovers. He only had 1 turnover tonight in 24 minutes of play, had 18 points, was 6 for 12 from the field, 2 of 6 from beyond the arc, had 5 free throw attempts, which is another encouraging stat. Had 4 rebounds, 4 assists, was a +3 in the plus minus. Those are all fantastic stats. I mean, outside of the 3-point shooting, and again, anything 33% or above is not a negative, right? 33% is the Mendoza line for 3-point shooting because that translates to 50% shooting from 2. So Lester Quinones played fantastically. 2 last players that I want to wrap the show up with tonight in terms of our discussions, and that's the team's 2 young bigs. Trayce Jackson-Davis and little big Draymond Green, better known as baby Draymond, better known as Usman Garuba. Garuba only played 3 minutes and change. I don't know why he got such a short run. I was looking forward to seeing him play some more. The stat sheet won't tell you how he did, but he looks like he belongs. I want to see more Garuba. Every time he's played so far, he makes me want to see more, and that's a good thing. Trayce Jackson-Davis, meanwhile, I do have some notes about him. I absolutely love this kid. One thing I noticed with Trayce Jackson-Davis, and what stuck out to me more than anything else, was his defense. There were a series of plays where 1 minute he was defending Alex Len, who's considerably bigger, held his own. Then all of a sudden there was a switch, right? And Trayce Jackson-Davis was suddenly guarding. Is it Keon Ellis? Is that the rookie for the Kings? That sound right to you, Greg?
Oh yeah, I think yeah. Okay, I'm actually so lost on Kings roster.
No worry. Maybe it was Colby Jones. It was one or the other. Maybe it was Colby Jones, but
I was watching this from the shower, getting ready for the show.
All good. But the Kings had, so whoever their first round pick was, he had the ball, and Trayce Jackson-Davis was switched on him. And I was observing this closely because I was like, all right, here's a quick player that under normal circumstances would probably blow by a bigger player like Trayce Jackson-Davis. Nope. Trayce Jackson-Davis held his own. Another thing I learned watching him closely tonight, dude can actually handle the ball. I'm not calling him a point guard, but he's not a liability if he has to dribble. Some bigs just look awkward at dribbling the ball. I am very happy with these two. Your thoughts?
Well, the Trayce Jackson-Davis, I'm really glad you bring up the interior defense presence, because I know that as time has gone on, Steve Kerr has fallen more in love with the small lineups and been more hesitant to run out there with bigs. But when he started, he was very, very attached to one of the two bigs that were established coming into that team that he took over from Mark Jackson. And the one he was not super fond of was David Lee, who had a nice offensive skill set, was kind of used as more of a pick and roll guy. And the one he really liked and relied on as an anchor was Andrew Bogut, and was raving about how he was a paint protector. I know that was a little bit of a differently structured team, and a lot of those guys were younger, but this isn't a foreign thing to this coaching staff, and especially Steve Kerr, to be very high on somebody that can have paint protecting abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if they get matched up in a big series with a Denver or a Lakers or anybody we've talked about that has size, we will see a Trayce Jackson-Davis get minutes, because we've seen guys before. Their minutes will completely vary based on the matchup series. I think it was against the Rockets where Looney was not a big part of it, but JaVale McGee was out there a bunch. And then Looney went back to being the guy when they were playing the Cavs in the finals. And so Trayce Jackson-Davis, like, if we see this guy play big playoff minutes, especially for a particular series matchup, I will not be surprised by that whatsoever. I'm willing to just put that bet down right now.
Hell yeah, man. Trayce Jackson-Davis looks like the real deal. I'm very happy with what I'm seeing so far. Again, he played 18 minutes tonight. Again, the stat sheet is not where he's going to show you his true value. He had 4 rebounds. Dr. Sean mentioned the fact that the dude can block. I agree. He's had quite a few of those already this preseason where he just comes out of nowhere and just completely swats the ball away. Rebel to Sounds writes, Kerr said in the postgame presser that at least one of the Warriors' upcoming games this week will be a dress rehearsal for the regular season. That'll be interesting. So, yeah. So anyways, so Garuba, I hope we see some more of them. But all in all, Greg, I am ecstatic with this team. I'm very optimistic. I know we're just 3 preseason games in. The team remains undefeated. And one of the many encouraging things is not just that the Warriors look good potentially for this season. It's this second unit could be a glimpse to what the Warriors are going to be like 5 years from now. And I'm encouraged. I'm very encouraged. Like 5 years from now, if we have a Jonathan Kuminga at 25, 26 years old, same with Moses Moody, Podziemski would be 24, 25. Trayce Jackson-Davis would be 27, 28. Look, the future could be very bright. So there's a multiple facets of optimism here. Any last thoughts, Greg, as we wrap up the show tonight?
Yeah, just that last year, I think Warrior fans, and I'm guilty of it too, like we all were at times, but impatience was a big thing throughout the full season. And I think just realizing how fortunate that they were to still have the great stars that they do kind of got lost sometimes with some of the frustrations around the team. And I just think this year it's like a breath of fresh air. That atmosphere seems really light around the team, and there's an opportunity to have patience and be good at the same time. And I think that's what we can really get. Now, the Warriors got to get off to a good start. Those first 10 games are going to be huge, but I'm feeling really optimistic about this. Like all these other rosters in the West, yes, I know it's stacked, but I'm feeling good. And yeah, see, I'm rubbing off on Cy, and this is a good end to the show. This is what's making me feel good. I'm going to be at the preseason game on Wednesday when they face off against the Kings once more. So I get to see some in-person observations, and I'm excited for that because I hope I get to see a little bit more Usman and get to see more continued Podziemski, and maybe we'll get some starters too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm optimistic so far. The test for me, there's going to be a few regular season games. Like the Nuggets are, to me, obviously, and I'm not stating anything insightful there. The Nuggets are the standard bearers. They're defending world champions. I'm very curious to see how that regular season matchup goes. But look, if these teams play in the regular season and the Warriors are mopping the floor with a team like the Nuggets, be stoked, Dub Nation. Like you can feel encouraged about this season. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. Good stuff. Greg, always a pleasure. Anything we feel like we missed tonight? I think we covered most bases, right? Long show, but good stuff.
I feel fantastic about it. I feel fantastic. Yeah. Keep following the socials for both of us. I mean, it's going to be a lot of Warriors content coming in the coming weeks. So we got Niners, we got Warriors, we got a whole bunch of Bay Area action coming. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I like Andre real fast in the chat. I started this from earlier, mentioning Kaminga's rip-through move tonight. I noticed that too. Kaminga's growing right before our eyes. Our little boy's all grunzed up. He's all grunzed up. He's getting there. Yeah, I'm ecstatic about this. So the one mystery remains that 14th roster spot. We did not see Rudy Gay play tonight, so who knows what they're going to do with that. But regardless, thanks to everyone for joining us. Greg, always a pleasure to have you again throughout the season. You're on with me weekly. So we'll be back at this before you know it. Thank you, G. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. And Greg, you can jump in here if you want anytime. Welcome.
Oh, like